The kitchen clock read 11:47 p.m. when Lara walked in, practically glowing. I was nursing my third cup of coffee, scrolling through work emails on my laptop, when she cleared her throat like she was about to deliver the State of the Union. "Rhett, honey, I have the most wonderful news." Her voice had that sing-song quality she used when talking to the church ladies about bake sales and prayer circles. I looked up from my screen. "Let me guess. The church finally approved funding for those new hymnals?" She shook her head, that radiant smile spreading wider. "Better. Much better." She paused for dramatic effect, clasping her hands together. "I'm pregnant." The coffee mug stopped halfway to my lips. I set it down carefully, buying myself a few seconds to process what she'd just said. Pregnant. Right. And I suppose next she'd tell me she'd spotted Elvis buying groceries at the corner market. "Interesting," I said finally. Her smile faltered just a fraction. "Interesting? Rhett, this is a miracle, a gift from God himself." "A gift from God. Sure thing, sweetheart. Because the Almighty apparently decided to override basic human biology and medical reality. I'd been medically certified as infertile twice, once 5 years ago, when we first started trying, and again 2 years back when Lara insisted on a second opinion. My swimmers weren't just slow, they were non-existent. My superpower was shooting blanks, not creating miracles. "That's, quite something," I managed, keeping my voice level. "When did you find out?" "Today. I took 3 tests just to be sure." She moved closer, reaching for my hands. "Isn't it wonderful? After all these years of praying and hoping?" I let her take my hands, studying her face. Lara had always been good at lying, to herself, to others, to me. It was one of her more refined talents, right up there with passive-aggressive commentary and selective memory. But this was ambitious even for her. 3 tests, I repeated. "Wow, that's thorough." "I know we've had our struggles, but this proves that God's timing is perfect. He knew when we were ready." "Ready. Right. Ready for what exactly?" "Ready for her to insult my intelligence with the biological impossibility of the century?" I nodded along, making appropriate sounds of amazement, while my mind raced through the implications. The past few months suddenly made a lot more sense. The extra volunteer hours at church, the deleted text messages I'd glimpsed on her phone, the way she'd started mentioning Dean Callix's name more frequently in conversation, always in passing, always casual, but frequent enough that I'd noticed. Dean, the church's so-called family counselor, 44 years old, divorced twice, with the kind of practiced charm that worked well on lonely housewives and gullible church boards. I'd met him a handful of times at church functions. Slick hair, expensive cologne, and the sort of smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Have you told anyone else?" I asked. "Not yet. I wanted you to be the first to know." She squeezed my hands. "We should probably schedule an appointment with Dr. Martinez soon. Start prenatal care." Dr. Martinez. The same doctor who'd confirmed my infertility diagnosis. The same doctor who'd explained in clinical detail why Lara and I would never conceive naturally. This was going to be an interesting conversation. "Of course," I said. "We should definitely do that." Lara beamed and leaned in to hug me. Over her shoulder, I stared at the kitchen wall, my mind already working through the next steps. If she wanted to play this game, I'd play along, but I'd play it smart. The next morning, Lara was up early, humming gospel songs while she made breakfast. She'd always been a morning person, but today she had an extra bounce in her step. The glow of impending motherhood, no doubt. Or the glow of someone who thought she'd pulled off the con of the century. "I was thinking we should start looking into cribs," she said, sliding scrambled eggs onto my plate. "And maybe we should convert the spare room into a nursery." "Bit early for that, isn't it?" I took a bite of eggs. "You're what, maybe 6 weeks along?" 7, actually, but it's never too early to plan. She sat down across from me with her own plate. "I've already been looking at some websites. There are so many beautiful options." 7 weeks. That put conception right around the time of the church's annual retreat weekend. The same weekend I'd stayed home with a stomach virus while Lara went alone. The same weekend she'd come back talking about what a profound spiritual experience she'd had. Profound. That was one word for it. "We should probably keep this quiet for a while," I said. "You know, until we're past the first trimester, just to be safe." Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "I suppose you're right. Though I'm so excited, I don't know how I'll keep it to myself." "I'm sure you'll manage." I finished my eggs and stood up. I should get going. Big day at work. As a technical manager at the regional telecommunications company, I spent most of my days troubleshooting network issues and managing a team of field technicians. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid well enough to support Lara's part-time church job and her extensive volunteer activities. Activities that apparently now included conceiving miraculous babies. At work, I found myself distracted, running through scenarios in my head. Lara wasn't stupid. Reckless, maybe, but not stupid. She had to know I'd figure it out eventually. Which meant either she thought she could convince me to accept the situation, or she was planning to leave before the truth came out. During my lunch break, I made a phone call. "Ardell and Associates, this is Trent." "Trent, it's Rhett. I need to ask you something hypothetical." Trent Ardell had been my friend since college, back when we were both idealistic enough to think we could change the world. He'd gone into law, I'd gone into technology. We'd stayed in touch over the years, bonding over our shared cynicism about human nature and our appreciation for good whiskey. Hypothetical, huh? Those are always the most interesting calls. What's the situation? Hypothetically, if a man's wife claimed to be pregnant, but the man had medical proof of infertility, what would be his legal options? There was a pause. That's quite a hypothetical. Are we talking fraud, adultery, divorce proceedings? All of the above, potentially. Well, hypothetically speaking, documentation would be key. Medical records, paternity tests, evidence of the affair if there is one. The more proof, the stronger the case. Why do you ask? Just curious, thanks, Trent. Rhett, if this isn't actually hypothetical, I'll call you if I need anything else. I hung up and stared out the window of my office. Documentation, evidence, proof. I could do that. I was good with details, good with planning. It came with the territory in my line of work. You couldn't fix complex network problems without methodical analysis and careful execution. That evening, Lara was on the phone when I got home, talking in hushed tones in the living room. I caught fragments of conversation as I hung up my jacket. "Know it's complicated, but has to believe? Just need more time." She ended the call quickly when she saw me. "Church business?" I asked. "Oh, yes. Betty was asking about the women's auxiliary meeting next week." She tucked her phone into her purse. "How was your day?" "Same old chaos. Network issues, customer complaints, the usual." I loosened my tie. "Who's covering your shifts while you're dealing with morning sickness?" Another slight hesitation. "I haven't had much morning sickness, actually. I feel great." "Lucky you. I've heard it can be pretty rough." That night, after Lara fell asleep, I quietly retrieved her laptop from the home office. She'd always been careless about passwords, using variations of our anniversary date for everything. It took me 3 tries to get into her cloud storage account. The Bible study folder was particularly enlightening. Dozens of text message backups, automatically synced from her phone. Months of conversations with Dean Callix that had nothing to do with spiritual guidance, and everything to do with stolen moments, secret meetings, and detailed discussions about their future together. I scrolled through message after message, my jaw tightening with each revelation. The retreat weekend had indeed been significant, but not in the way Lara had described to me. There were photos, too. Nothing explicit, but intimate enough to leave no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The most recent messages were particularly interesting. Dean expressing concern about complications, and Lara reassuring him that everything would work out. references to the plan, and discussions about timing. I copied everything to a secure folder on my own laptop, then carefully closed Lara's computer and returned it to its place. Back in bed, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Lara slept peacefully beside me, one hand resting on her still flat stomach. God's gift. Right. The next morning brought another performance from Lara, complete with enthusiastic discussions about baby names and nursery colors. I played my part, nodding and smiling while mentally cataloging every lie, every manipulation, every calculated word. "I think we should schedule that doctor's appointment soon," I said over coffee. "I'd like to be there for the first ultrasound." "Of course, honey. I'll call Dr. Martinez's office today. Actually, I was thinking we might want to go somewhere new. Fresh start, you know? I heard good things about the women's health clinic downtown." Lara's coffee cup clinked against the saucer. "Oh, well, I suppose we could consider that. Though Dr. Martinez knows our history." "Exactly. Might be nice to work with someone who doesn't have preconceived notions about our situation." I kept my voice casual, conversational. Besides, I've heard they have more modern equipment, better imaging technology. I'll look into it. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The Women's Health Clinic was run by Dr. Maren Hollis, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, who'd built a reputation for discretion and professionalism. More importantly, she was someone who valued facts over feelings, science over wishful thinking. I called her office that afternoon. "Dr. Hollis, this is Rhett Vossen. I'd like to schedule a consultation. My wife is claiming to be pregnant, but I have medical documentation proving I'm infertile. I need someone who can handle this situation delicately but honestly." "I see. That is indeed a delicate situation, Mr. Vossen. Can you bring your medical records?" "Absolutely. And doctor, this needs to be handled carefully. My wife doesn't know I'm aware of the complications." "I understand. We'll schedule you for tomorrow afternoon. Come alone first, and we'll discuss how to proceed." Dr. Hollis turned out to be exactly what I'd hoped for: professional, direct, and completely unimpressed by dramatic claims of miraculous conception. I showed her my medical records, explained the situation, and watched her nod with the weary expression of someone who'd seen this scenario before. "It's more common than you might think," she said. "Women in failing marriages sometimes convince themselves that a pregnancy will fix everything. The fact that she's trying to involve medical professionals suggests she's either delusional or planning something more elaborate. What do you recommend?" "Bring her in. Let her tell her story. I'll order the appropriate tests. Bad work, ultrasound, the works. If she's actually pregnant, we'll know immediately. If she's not..." She shrugged. "Well, that will be clear too." "And if she is pregnant but it's not mine?" "Paternity testing is routine. We can handle that discreetly." I left the clinic feeling more in control than I had in days. Whatever Lara was planning, whatever game she thought she was playing, she was about to discover that I wasn't the naive husband she'd taken me for. That evening, I brought up the clinic again. "I called the Women's Health Clinic today," I said. "They can see us tomorrow afternoon." Lara looked up from her magazine. "Tomorrow? That's awfully soon. I thought you'd be excited to get started with prenatal care, unless there's a reason to wait." Her smile was tight. "No, of course not. Tomorrow is fine." "Great. Dr. Hollis seems very thorough. She'll likely want to run a full evaluation, tests, imaging, the whole suite." "Naturally." Lara's voice was steady, but I caught the slight tension in her shoulders. "I'm sure everything will be perfectly normal." Normal. Right. Because there was nothing normal about this situation. Nothing normal about a woman trying to pass off another man's child as her infertile husband's. Nothing normal about the elaborate web of lies she'd constructed to support her fantasy. But tomorrow, reality would come calling, and I'd be there to watch her carefully constructed world start to crumble. As I lay in bed that night, listening to Lara's breathing beside me, I allowed myself a small smile. She wanted to play games with God's gifts? Fine. But she was about to learn that some gifts come with a return policy. The Women's Health Clinic occupied a sleek glass building downtown, all clean lines and modern efficiency. As we walked through the automatic doors, I could feel Lara's tension radiating off her like heat from asphalt. She'd been unusually quiet during the drive, her usual cheerful chatter replaced by nervous silence. "This place is very contemporary," she said, looking around the minimalist waiting room with its abstract art and designer furniture. "Dr. Hollis believes in staying current with medical advances," I replied. "I thought you'd appreciate that attention to detail." The receptionist called us back within minutes. Dr. Hollis greeted us in her office, a woman with silver hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She shook Lara's hand with professional warmth, then mine with the slightest hint of acknowledgement. "Mrs. Vossen, congratulations on your pregnancy. Your husband mentioned you've been trying for some time." "Yes, we have." Lara's voice was steady, but I noticed her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "It's been a long journey, but God's timing is always perfect." "Indeed. Well, let's get you examined and see how everything is progressing. When was your last menstrual period?" As Lara provided dates and details, I watched Dr. Hollis take notes with the methodical precision of someone who'd heard countless stories and knew how to separate fact from fiction. The examination room was next, where Lara changed into a hospital gown while I waited in the hallway. "Mr. Vossen?" Dr. Hollis appeared beside me. "Could I speak with you privately for a moment?" We stepped into her office. "I've reviewed the records you provided yesterday. Very thorough documentation. I'll be conducting a complete examination, including bad work and ultrasound. If your wife is pregnant, we'll know definitively within the hour. And if she is, then we'll discuss paternity testing options. There are non-invasive methods available now that are completely safe for both mother and fetus." 20 minutes later, we were back in the examination room. Lara lay on the table while Dr. Hollis prepared the ultrasound equipment. The gel was cold. Lara jumped slightly when it touched her skin. "Let's see what we can find," Dr. Hollis said, moving the transducer across Lara's abdomen. The monitor flickered to life, showing the grainy black and white images familiar from countless medical dramas. I watched Lara's face as Dr. Hollis moved the probe, searching for signs of the miraculous pregnancy. Minutes passed. Dr. Hollis's expression remained neutral, professional, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. She said finally. "Mrs. Vossen, are you certain about your dates?" "Of course. Why?" "I'm not seeing what I'd expect to see at 7 weeks gestation." Dr. Hollis continued her examination, moving the probe to different positions. "Let me try a different approach." More minutes passed. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of medical equipment and Lara's increasingly rapid breathing. "Doctor?" Lara's voice was strained. "Is everything all right?" Dr. Hollis set down the transducer and cleaned the gel from Lara's skin. "Mrs. Vossen, I'm not finding any evidence of pregnancy on the ultrasound. No gestational sac, no fetal development, nothing consistent with a 7-week pregnancy." The color drained from Lara's face. But that's impossible. I took 3 tests. They were all positive. Home pregnancy tests can sometimes show false positives. Certain medications, medical conditions, even some cleaning products can interfere with the results. Dr. Hollis's voice was gentle but firm. "We'll run bad work to check your hormone levels, but based on the ultrasound, I don't believe you're pregnant." I watched this exchange with fascination. Lara was either the world's most accomplished actress, or she genuinely convinced herself that she was carrying a child. The panic in her eyes looked real enough. "There must be some mistake," Lara insisted. "Could you check again?" "Of course." Dr. Hollis repeated the ultrasound, taking her time, but the results were the same. I'm sorry, Mrs. Vossen. I know this isn't what you were hoping to hear. Lara sat up slowly, her hospital gown clutched around her. I don't understand. I felt different. I was so sure. Sometimes our bodies can play tricks on us, especially when we want something very badly. Dr. Hollis handed Lara a tissue. The mind is powerful. It can create physical symptoms that feel very real. What about the bad work? I asked. We'll have those results in a few hours, but I'm confident they'll confirm what the ultrasound showed. As Lara got dressed, I found myself studying her carefully. The devastation on her face seemed genuine. Either she was a better actress than I'd given her credit for, or something more complicated was happening here. The drive home was silent. Lara stared out the passenger window, occasionally wiping her eyes. I focused on the road, my mind racing through possibilities. If she wasn't pregnant, then what had been the point of the elaborate charade? What was she trying to accomplish? I don't understand what happened, she said finally, as we pulled into our driveway. These things happen. Dr. Hollis explained about false positives. But I was so certain. I felt it, Rhett. I really felt it. Inside the house, Lara went straight to our bedroom and closed the door. I heard the soft sounds of crying through the walls. Part of me almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the text messages, the photos, the months of lies and deception. Whatever game she'd been playing, it had backfired spectacularly. My phone rang an hour later. Dr. Hollis. Mr. Vossen, the bad work confirms our ultrasound findings. Your wife is not pregnant. Her hormone levels are completely normal. Thank you for letting me know. There's something else. During our conversation, your wife mentioned feeling different recently. Given what you told me about your situation, I think it's possible she's been experiencing psychosomatic symptoms related to stress or guilt. Meaning? Meaning her body may have been responding to psychological pressure. It's not uncommon in cases of marital infidelity. The guilt and stress can manifest as physical symptoms. Interesting. So Lara's body had been betraying her even as her mind constructed elaborate justifications. There was a certain poetic justice in that. What do you recommend? Counseling, probably. For both of you. This kind of situation rarely resolves itself without professional help. After hanging up, I sat in my home office, staring at the computer screen where I'd saved Lara's text messages. If she wasn't pregnant, then what had been her endgame? Had she planned to fake a miscarriage, find a way to actually get pregnant? Or had she genuinely deluded herself into believing the impossible? A knock on the office door interrupted my thoughts. Rhett? Lara's voice was small, uncertain. Can we talk? I opened the door. She stood in the hallway, eyes red from crying, looking more vulnerable than I'd seen her in years. Of course. Come in. She sat down in the chair across from my desk, the same chair where she'd once helped me plan our wedding, where we'd discussed buying this house, where we'd dreamed about our future together. Back when I'd believed in those dreams. I'm sorry, she said. I know how disappointed you must be. These things happen. I really thought... I was so sure. She twisted her wedding ring around her finger. Maybe I wanted it so badly that I convinced myself it was real. Maybe. Do you think we should try again? Maybe see a fertility specialist? I know what the doctor said before, but medical science is always advancing. I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. She was good. I had to give her that. The perfect picture of a disappointed wife, clinging to hope despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Lara, we've been through this before. Multiple doctors, multiple tests. The results were very clear. But miracles do happen. Look at Sarah in the Bible. She was 90 when she conceived Isaac. Sarah didn't have modern medical testing to contend with. She was quiet for a moment, then looked up at me with those wide, innocent eyes that had first attracted me 15 years ago. You don't believe anymore, do you? In miracles, I mean. I believe in facts, in evidence, in reality. That's so sad. She shook her head. When did you become so cynical? When did I become cynical? Maybe it was when I discovered my wife was carrying on an affair with the church counselor. Maybe it was when she tried to convince me that her lover's child was a divine miracle. Or maybe it was right now, watching her perform this elaborate show of wounded innocence. I prefer to think of it as realistic. Well, I still believe in miracles, and I believe that God has a plan for us, even when we can't see it. God's plan. Right. I wondered if God's plan included adultery and deception, or if those were Lara's personal contributions to the divine scheme. Speaking of plans, I said, maybe we should consider counseling. Dr. Hollis mentioned that this kind of stress can be hard on a marriage. For just a moment, something flickered across Lara's face. Fear? Panic? Then it was gone, replaced by that serene church lady smile. Counseling might be helpful, though I think we should probably find someone who shares our faith values, someone who understands the spiritual dimension of marriage. Someone like Dean Callix? The words were out before I could stop them. Lara's face went white. Dean? Why would you? I mean, he's just the church counselor. I barely know him. You mentioned him a few times recently. I thought maybe you'd found his guidance helpful. Oh, well, yes. He's given some good sermons about marriage and family. Very inspiring. Her voice was too bright, too casual. But for something this personal, we'd probably want someone more experienced. Probably. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. I should start dinner. Thank you for being so understanding about today. I know it wasn't what either of us expected. After she left, I opened my laptop and scrolled through the saved text messages again. One conversation from 2 weeks ago caught my attention. Dean. What if he figures it out? Lara. He won't. Rhett's not suspicious by nature. Besides, by the time anyone questions anything, it won't matter. Dean. You're sure about the timing? Lara. Positive. Everything's planned perfectly. Trust me, everything's planned perfectly. But planned for what? If she wasn't actually pregnant, what had been the point of the elaborate deception? I scrolled further back, looking for clues. There, a conversation from 3 months ago. Lara, I've been thinking about what you said, about starting fresh somewhere new. Dean, the church in Colorado is still interested in hiring me, but I can't just leave without a good reason. Lara, what if you had a family to support, a wife and child who needed you? Dean, are you saying what I think you're saying? Lara, I'm saying maybe it's time to stop hiding, time to claim what God has planned for us. So that was it. Lara had been planning to leave, with Dean claiming to carry his child, forcing a dramatic confrontation that would justify her departure. The pregnancy announcement was supposed to be the opening move in her exit strategy. But something had gone wrong. Maybe she'd miscalculated her cycle. Maybe the stress had interfered with her body's natural rhythms. Or maybe, as Dr. Hollis suggested, the guilt and deception had created phantom symptoms that felt real enough to convince even her. Whatever the reason, her carefully laid plans had just collapsed, which meant she'd be scrambling for a new strategy, and that made her dangerous. I picked up my phone and called Trent. Remember that hypothetical situation we discussed? It just got more complicated. How complicated? The pregnancy was fake, but the affair is real, and I think they were planning to run away together. Ah, so now you're dealing with attempted fraud on top of adultery. Do you have evidence? Plenty. Text messages, photos, the whole digital trail. Good. Document everything, but don't confront anyone yet. If they're planning to run, you want to be ready with legal action before they disappear. What kind of legal action? Depends on what you want to accomplish. Divorce, obviously. But if they've been planning this for months, there might be financial fraud involved too. Joint accounts, credit cards, property transfers. We'll need to audit everything. After hanging up, I sat back and considered my options. Lara thought she was playing chess while I played checkers. She had no idea that I'd been watching, learning, documenting every move. But now the game was changing. Her original plan had failed, which meant she'd have to adapt. And when people adapted under pressure, they made mistakes. I intended to be ready for those mistakes. From the kitchen came the sounds of dinner preparation, pots clattering, the refrigerator opening and closing, Lara humming hymns as she cooked. The domestic symphony of a woman who thought she still had control of the situation. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd start applying some pressure of my own. See how well her faith held up when the foundations started to crack. After all, if God worked in mysterious ways, maybe it was time for a little divine intervention of my own. Sunday morning arrived with the usual ritual of church preparation. Lara emerged from the bathroom in her modest floral dress, pearl earrings, and the kind of smile that belonged in a church directory. You'd never guess that 24 hours ago she'd been sobbing over her failed pregnancy charade. "Ready for service?" she asked, adjusting her purse strap. "Looking forward to it." And I was, in a way. Today would be interesting. First Baptist Church of Millfield occupied a full city block, its red brick facade and white steeple projecting the kind of traditional authority that attracted families like ours. Inside, the sanctuary buzzed with pre-service conversation, discussions of weather, work, and the carefully sanitized version of personal lives that people shared in public. We took our usual seats in the fourth row, close enough to show commitment, but not so close as to appear overly pious. Lara immediately began her weekly social rounds, turning to greet Mrs. Henderson behind us, waving to the Johnsons across the aisle, nodding respectfully to the church elders in their front row positions. "Lara, dear, you look radiant this morning," said Betty Marsh, sliding into the pew beside us. Betty was the church's unofficial information clearinghouse, a woman who collected gossip with the dedication of a museum curator. "Thank you, Betty. I feel blessed. Any exciting news to share?" Betty's eyes sparkled with anticipation. She had an uncanny ability to sense when someone was harboring secrets. "Oh, you know how it is. Just taking things one day at a time, trusting in God's plan." I watched this exchange with interest. Lara was being unusually circumspect. Normally, she'd have already shared the pregnancy news with half the congregation by now. The fact that she was holding back suggested she was still processing yesterday's revelations. The service began with the usual hymns and announcements. Pastor Williams delivered a sermon about faith in times of uncertainty, which seemed particularly appropriate given our circumstances. But my attention was focused on the choir loft, where Dean Callix sat with the other church staff. Dean looked nervous. He kept glancing toward our section of the sanctuary, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something that looked suspiciously like anxiety. When his eyes met mine, he quickly looked away. During the passing of the peace, I made my move. "Dean," I said, approaching him with an extended hand. "Good to see you this morning." "Oh, hello, Rhett." His handshake was damp with perspiration. "How are things?" "Interesting, actually. Lara and I had quite an eventful weekend. Medical appointments. You know how it is." His face went pale. "Medical appointments?" "Nothing serious. Just routine checkups. Though we did learn some fascinating things about modern medical testing. Amazing how accurate these procedures have become." Yes, medical science is quite advanced these days. Indeed, they can determine all sorts of things now. Paternity, for instance. Did you know they can run those tests as early as 9 weeks into a pregnancy? Non-invasive, completely safe. Remarkable what technology can accomplish. Dean's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. That's very interesting. Isn't it? Of course, you'd need an actual pregnancy for those tests to be relevant. I smiled pleasantly. "Have a blessed day, Dean." I walked back to my pew, leaving Dean standing frozen by the choir loft. Lara looked up as I sat down. What were you and Dean discussing? Oh, just chatting about modern medicine. He seemed very interested in recent advances in prenatal testing. Something flickered across her face, too quick to interpret, but definitely not the serene contentment she'd been projecting. After service, we lingered in the fellowship hall for coffee and cookies. I watched Lara work the room with practiced ease, accepting sympathy for yesterday's disappointment while maintaining an air of faithful optimism. She was good at this, the performance of being a devoted Christian wife, facing life's challenges with grace and dignity. "Rhett, how's Lara handling things?" asked Jim Patterson, one of the church elders. "Betty mentioned you folks had some medical concerns." "She's handling it with her usual faith and strength, though I have to admit it's been educational for me." "How so?" "Well, you learn a lot about people when they're under pressure, about what they really believe, what they're really capable of. Sometimes the revelations are quite surprising." Jim nodded sagely. "Trials have a way of revealing character. The Bible tells us that faith is refined like gold in fire." "Exactly, and some materials turn out to be less pure than they initially appeared." Across the room, I caught sight of Dean making a hasty exit through the side door. Lara noticed too. Her eyes tracked his departure with barely concealed concern. "Well," she said, appearing at my elbow, "I think it's time we headed home. I'm feeling a bit tired. Of course, it's been an emotionally draining weekend." As we drove home, Lara was unusually quiet. Finally, she spoke. "You seem to be having some intense conversations today." "Just the usual fellowship. Though Dean seemed a bit off, don't you think? Almost like he was worried about something. I didn't notice anything unusual." Maybe it's just the stress of his job. Counseling people must be emotionally demanding. All those secrets, all that responsibility for other people's problems." Lara's knuckles were white where she gripped her purse. "I'm sure he manages just fine. I'm sure he does, though I imagine it gets complicated when professional boundaries start to blur, when counseling relationships become more personal." "What do you mean by that?" I kept my eyes on the road. "Oh, nothing specific. Just thinking about how challenging it must be to maintain appropriate distance when you're dealing with intimate family matters, marriage counseling, fertility issues, that sort of thing." "Dean doesn't do marriage counseling." The words came out too quickly, too defensively. I filed that away for future reference. "Doesn't he? I thought that was part of his role as family counselor." "Well, maybe occasionally. But mostly he focuses on spiritual guidance and general family support." "Ah, that makes sense." At home, Lara disappeared into the bedroom while I settled into my office. Time to do some research on Mr. Dean Callix. If I was going to apply pressure, I needed to understand exactly what I was working with. An hour of internet searching revealed some interesting details about Dean's background. 2 divorces, as I'd known, but also some financial irregularities at his previous church position in Indiana. Nothing criminal, but enough to raise questions about his judgment and integrity. He'd left that position rather suddenly, citing a call to serve elsewhere. His current financial situation was also illuminating. Despite his church salary, he was behind on his car payments and had racked up significant credit card debt. His apartment was in one of the city's less desirable complexes, and public records showed he'd been late on rent multiple times over the past year. So Dean was financially desperate. That explained part of his motivation. Lara represented stability, respectability, and access to our comfortable middle-class lifestyle. If he could convince her to leave me for him, he'd solve several problems at once. But desperation also made people unpredictable, and unpredictable people made mistakes. Monday morning brought a phone call that changed everything. "Mr. Vossen, this is Dr. Hollis. I hope you don't mind me calling directly, but I wanted to follow up on Saturday's appointment." "Of course. What can I do for you?" "It's more what I can do for you. After you left, I started thinking about your wife's symptoms and behavior. Something didn't add up. How do you mean? Well, her certainty about being pregnant, combined with the timing you described, suggested she might have had reason to believe conception was possible. So I did some additional research. What kind of research? I checked with a colleague who works in reproductive endocrinology. Hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to fake pregnancy symptoms convincingly, there are ways to do it. Hormone supplements, for instance, could create positive home pregnancy tests while producing physical symptoms that feel authentic. My grip tightened on the phone. Are you saying she deliberately faked the pregnancy? I'm saying it's possible. The hormone levels in her bad work were normal, but certain supplements metabolize quickly. If she'd stopped taking them recently, we might not detect any residue. Why are you telling me this? Because if I'm right, this isn't just a case of wishful thinking or psychosomatic symptoms. This is deliberate deception, and given what you told me about your marital situation, I thought you should know. After hanging up, I sat staring at my computer screen, pieces of the puzzle rearranging themselves in my mind. Lara hadn't just convinced herself she was pregnant, she'd actively created the illusion, which meant her plan had been more sophisticated than I'd realized. But it also meant she'd made a crucial error. She'd involved a medical professional who was smart enough to see through the deception. And now, I had an expert witness who could testify to the fraud if necessary. I picked up my phone and called Trent. Remember that evidence I mentioned? We just got a smoking gun. That evening, Lara seemed distracted during dinner. She picked at her food, responded to conversation with vague murmurs, and kept checking her phone. Everything all right? I asked. Fine. Just thinking about work tomorrow. Anything specific? Oh, the usual church politics. Sometimes I wonder if people really understand what Christian fellowship is supposed to mean. Problems with the staff? She looked up sharply. Why would you ask that? You seemed concerned about something. I thought maybe there were issues with your colleagues. No, nothing like that. Everyone's been very supportive, especially given our recent disappointment. That's good. Support is important during difficult times, though I imagine some people might be wondering about the details of our situation. What details? Well, the medical aspects. People are naturally curious about fertility issues, especially in a church community where families are so important. Lara set down her fork. I hope you haven't been discussing our private medical information with anyone. Of course not. Though I did mention to Dr. Hollis that we might need ongoing support. She seemed very understanding about the complexities involved. What complexities? Oh, the psychological aspects of fertility struggles, the way stress and guilt can manifest as physical symptoms. She was quite knowledgeable about how emotional trauma can affect the body. Lara's face had gone pale. Guilt? Why would she mention guilt? Just in general terms. How people sometimes blame themselves for medical problems, that sort of thing. Though she did say that in cases involving marital stress, the psychological symptoms can be quite severe. I should clear these dishes. She stood abruptly, gathering plates with shaking hands. I watched her retreat to the kitchen, noting the tension in her shoulders, the careful way she avoided meeting my eyes. The pressure was working. Now it was time to increase it. I followed her to the kitchen, where she was loading the dishwasher with mechanical precision. Lara, can I ask you something? What? Do you think Dean would be available for counseling sessions? Given everything we've been through, it might help to talk to someone who understands our spiritual perspective. The plate in her hands slipped, clattering against the dishwasher rack. Dean, I don't think he does that kind of counseling. Really? I thought family counseling was his specialty. Well, yes, but not marriage counseling specifically. That's usually handled by outside professionals. That's too bad. I was hoping to work with someone from our church community. Someone who knows us personally. Why would you want that? I moved closer, studying her face. Because I think our problems are more complicated than they might appear on the surface. I think there are trust issues that need to be addressed. Honesty issues. What do you mean? I mean, I think we need to have some very frank discussions about our marriage, about expectations and boundaries, and what it means to honor the vows we made to each other. Lara's hands were trembling now. Rhett, I don't understand what you're getting at. Don't you? I think you understand perfectly. For a moment, we stood facing each other across the kitchen, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Then Lara's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and whatever she saw there made her face go white. I need to make a phone call, she said, already moving toward the hallway. Church business? Yes, church business. I waited until she disappeared into the bedroom, then quietly moved closer to the door. Her voice was hushed but urgent. We need to talk, tonight. Something's wrong. A pause. No, not here. Meet me at the usual place in an hour. Another pause. I don't care about the risks. We have a problem. The usual place. How romantic. I wondered where that might be. The church parking lot? Some secluded coffee shop? Dean's shabby apartment? It didn't matter. What mattered was that they were panicking, and when people panicked, they made the kind of mistakes that turned hypothetical legal cases into slam-dunk victories. I returned to my office and opened my laptop. Time to document everything I'd learned today. The medical evidence, the behavioral observations, the overheard phone conversation. Trent would need all of it when we moved to the next phase. Because we were definitely moving to the next phase. Lara and Dean had played their hand, and it was weaker than they'd realized. Now it was my turn to show them what a real strategy looked like. From the bedroom came the sound of Lara getting ready to leave, closet doors opening, footsteps moving back and forth, the rustle of clothing. She was trying to be quiet, but anxiety made people clumsy. 20 minutes later, she appeared in the office doorway, car keys in hand. I need to run out for a bit. Betty called about an emergency with the women's auxiliary. At 9 o'clock on a Monday night? It's urgent. Something about the fundraiser next week. Of course, take your time. After she left, I sat back in my chair and smiled. Betty Marsh was probably home watching television, blissfully unaware that she'd just become part of Lara's increasingly desperate cover story. But that was fine. Let them have their emergency meeting. Let them scramble to figure out how much I knew and what I might do with the information. Because tomorrow, the real game would begin. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was finishing my coffee when the doorbell rang, revealing Dean Callix on my front porch. He looked like he hadn't slept. Rumpled clothes, red eyes, and the kind of nervous energy that comes from too much caffeine and too little rest. Rhett, I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd check on how you and Lara are handling things. That's very thoughtful of you, Dean. Please, come in. He followed me into the living room, his eyes darting around like he was cataloging escape routes. I gestured to the couch, but he remained standing. Coffee? I offered. No, thank you. I can't stay long. Of course. Busy schedule, I'm sure. Lots of counseling appointments, spiritual guidance sessions, that sort of thing. Yes. Well, the church keeps me quite occupied. I settled into my armchair, studying his face. I imagine it must be challenging work. All those personal problems, family crises, marital difficulties. People probably tell you things they wouldn't share with anyone else. That's part of the calling. People need someone they can trust with their struggles. Trust. That's so important, isn't it? Especially in matters of faith and family. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Though I suppose it gets complicated when professional relationships become more personal. Dean's face went pale. I'm not sure what you mean. Oh, just thinking about the challenges of maintaining appropriate boundaries. It must be tempting sometimes to get more involved in people's lives than might be strictly appropriate. I always maintain professional standards. I'm sure you do, though I have to admit I've been curious about your counseling methods. Lara speaks so highly of your guidance. She does? Oh, yes. She mentions your sessions quite frequently, almost like they're the highlight of her week. Dean's hands were shaking now. He shoved them into his pockets, but not before I noticed. I don't recall having formal counseling sessions with your wife. Really? That's interesting. She's given me quite detailed accounts of your discussions. Very personal conversations about marriage, family planning, future goals, that sort of thing. Perhaps she's mischaracterized our interactions. Sometimes people read more into casual conversations than was intended. Perhaps, though some of the details she's shared seem quite specific, intimate even. Dean took a step toward the door. I should probably go. I don't want to take up more of your time. Actually, I'm glad you stopped by. I've been meaning to ask you about something. He froze. What's that? Well, given your expertise in family counseling, I wondered if you might have some insight into a hypothetical situation. Hypothetical? Yes. Suppose a married woman convinced herself she was pregnant, even though her husband was medically infertile. What would you make of that from a psychological perspective? The color drained completely from Dean's face. That would depend on many factors. Such as, well, the woman's mental state, her motivations, whether there might be other explanations for her belief. Other explanations. Like what? I couldn't speculate without knowing more details. Of course, but hypothetically, if such a woman was having an affair, might that explain her conviction about being pregnant? Dean's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I really couldn't say. No? That's surprising. I would have thought someone with your training would have insights into that kind of psychological dynamic. Every situation is unique. Without proper evaluation, it would be inappropriate for me to offer opinions. How professional of you. I stood up, moving closer to him. Though I have to say, your concern for Lara's well-being is touching. Not every church counselor would make house calls to check on parishioners. I care about all the members of our congregation. I'm sure you do. Some more than others, perhaps? Dean was backing toward the door now, his face a mask of barely controlled panic. I really need to go. Of course. Give my regards to the rest of the church staff. And Dean? Yes? If you do have any insights into that hypothetical situation I mentioned, please let me know. I'm very interested in understanding the psychological dynamics involved. After he left, I watched through the window as he practically ran to his car. His hands were shaking so badly it took him 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. Phase 1 of the pressure campaign was working beautifully. At work, I found it difficult to concentrate on network diagnostics and customer service issues. My mind kept returning to the chess game I was playing with Lara and Dean. They were scrambling now, trying to figure out how much I knew and what I planned to do with the information. The beauty of the situation was that they couldn't ask directly without admitting guilt. They were trapped in a web of their own lies, forced to guess at my intentions while trying to maintain their innocent facades. During lunch, I decided to visit the church. Lara worked part-time in the administrative office, handling donations and volunteer coordination. It would be interesting to see how she was handling the stress. The church office occupied a small building adjacent to the main sanctuary, all wood paneling and motivational posters featuring Bible verses. Lara sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen with the intensity of someone trying to solve a complex mathematical equation. Surprise, I said, appearing in her doorway with a bouquet of flowers from the grocery store. She jumped like she'd been electrocuted. Rhett, what are you doing here? Thought I'd bring my wife some flowers. Show her how much I appreciate her strength during our difficult time. That's That's very sweet. She accepted the bouquet with trembling hands. You didn't need to do that. I wanted to. I've been thinking a lot about our marriage lately, about trust and honesty and the importance of open communication. Oh? Yes. I realized I haven't been paying enough attention to what you need from me. Your emotional needs, your spiritual needs, your need for honest conversation about our relationship. Lara's smile looked painted on. We can talk more about that at home. Actually, I was hoping we could start now. Maybe take a walk, find somewhere private where we can really open up to each other. I'm at work, Rhett. I can't just leave. Of course not, though I did notice Dean's car in the parking lot. Maybe he could join us for a discussion about marriage and family values. The flowers slipped from Lara's hands, scattering across her desk. Dean's here on church business. I'm sure he is. He seems very dedicated to his work, very hands-on in his approach to counseling. What do you mean by that? Just that he takes a personal interest in the people he's trying to help, goes above and beyond the usual professional boundaries. Lara was gathering the scattered flowers with mechanical precision, her movements sharp and nervous. I think you're reading too much into his dedication. Am I? He seemed quite concerned about our situation when he stopped by the house this morning. He stopped by our house? Didn't he tell you? We had a very interesting conversation about hypothetical psychological scenarios. He was surprisingly evasive for someone with his training. I'm sure he was just being professional. Perhaps. Though his behavior seemed more like someone who was afraid he might say the wrong thing. Lara's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and whatever she saw there made her face go white. I need to use the restroom, she said, standing abruptly. Of course, take your time. While she was gone, I glanced at her computer screen. She'd been researching divorce lawyers. Interesting. So she was already planning her exit strategy, probably hoping to get ahead of whatever revelations she thought were coming. But she'd made a crucial error. By researching lawyers on her work computer, she'd created a digital trail that could be subpoenaed if necessary. Another piece of evidence for Trent's growing file. When Lara returned, her composure was somewhat restored, but I could see the strain around her eyes. I should get back to work, she said. Of course. Don't let me keep you from your important duties. I paused at the door. Oh, and Lara, if you need to discuss anything at all, you know you can talk to me, right? I'm your husband. We shouldn't have secrets between us. Her laugh sounded forced. Of course not. We don't have secrets. Good. I'm glad we understand each other. That evening, I implemented the next phase of my strategy. After dinner, I casually mentioned that I'd been thinking about our future. Future? Lara looked up from her magazine. Yes. Our marriage, our goals, what we want to accomplish together. I moved to the couch beside her. I know the past few days have been difficult, but I think they've also been enlightening. How so? Well, they've made me realize how much I value honesty in our relationship, how important it is that we be completely transparent with each other. I agree. Good. So in the spirit of transparency, I want you to know that I've been doing some research. Her magazine slipped from her hands. Research? About fertility issues, medical testing, the psychological aspects of pregnancy loss. I've learned some fascinating things. Such as? Well, for instance, did you know that it's possible to fake pregnancy symptoms using hormone supplements? Amazing what modern chemistry can accomplish. The color drained from Lara's face. Why would anyone want to do that? I couldn't imagine, though I suppose someone might have reasons we couldn't understand. Desperation, perhaps, or maybe as part of some larger plan. That sounds horrible, doesn't it? The kind of deception that would require careful planning and deliberate manipulation. The kind of thing that would destroy trust completely if it were ever discovered. Lara stood up abruptly. I think I'll take a bath. It's been a long day. Of course. Relax. Take your time. We can continue this conversation later. As she headed toward the bathroom, I called after her. Oh, and Lara, I scheduled an appointment with a marriage counselor for next week. I thought it might help us work through these trust issues we've been discussing. She stopped in the hallway, her back to me. What trust issues? The ones we're going to discuss. The ones about honesty and transparency and the importance of fidelity in marriage. I don't think counseling is necessary. I disagree. I think we have a lot to talk about. A lot of secrets to bring into the light. She disappeared into the bathroom without another word. A few minutes later, I heard the sound of running water and muffled sobbing. Phase 2 was progressing nicely. While Lara soaked in the tub, I returned to my office and called Trent with an update. She's researching divorce lawyers, I told him, and Dean's starting to crack under pressure. Good. The more desperate they get, the more mistakes they'll make. Are you ready for the next step? What did you have in mind? Financial audit. If they've been planning to run away together, there might be hidden accounts, transferred assets, that sort of thing. I can have a forensic accountant go through everything. Do it. Also, I think it's time to consider private investigation services. Document their meetings, get photos if possible. Build an airtight case for adultery. Whatever it takes. One more thing, Rhett. Are you sure you want to go down this road? Once we start formal proceedings, there's no going back. Your marriage will be over. I thought about that for a moment, listening to Lara's continued sobbing from the bathroom. Trent, my marriage ended the moment she decided to betray me. I'm just making it official. All right then. Let's destroy them. After hanging up, I sat back in my chair and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new pressures, new revelations, new opportunities to watch their carefully constructed lies crumble, and I was going to enjoy every minute of it. Wednesday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth and the kind of bright sunshine that made everything look deceptively cheerful. Lara emerged from the bedroom looking like she'd spent the night wrestling with demons, dark circles under her eyes, pale skin, and the kind of brittle composure that suggested she was barely holding herself together. Sleep well? I asked over coffee. Fine. Her voice was hoarse. You look tired. Maybe you should stay home from work today. I have responsibilities. Of course you do. Though I wonder if your colleagues have noticed how stressed you've been lately. People tend to worry when someone they care about seems to be struggling. She set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. I'm not struggling. No, that's good to hear. Though Dean seemed quite concerned yesterday when he stopped by, almost like he felt personally responsible for your well-being. Dean was just being pastoral. Was he? That's interesting because he seemed more frightened than pastoral, like someone who was worried about being found out. Found out about what? I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. That's an excellent question, Lara. What do you think Dean might be worried about being found out about? I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't you? Because I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. I think you've known all along. For a moment, something flickered across her face, a flash of the real Lara beneath the carefully maintained facade. Then it was gone, replaced by wounded innocence. Rhett, I don't understand why you're being so hostile lately. We're supposed to be supporting each other through this difficult time. You're right. We should be supporting each other. Husbands and wives should be honest with each other, faithful to each other, committed to the vows they made before God and their families. I have been faithful. Have you? That's wonderful to hear. So if I were to ask you about your relationship with Dean, you'd have nothing to hide? The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Lara's face cycled through a series of expressions, panic, calculation, desperate hope that she could still salvage the situation. My relationship with Dean is purely professional. Professional. Like the professional relationship documented in these text messages. I pulled out my phone and began reading. I can't stop thinking about yesterday. When can we be together again? That doesn't sound very professional to me. Lara's face went white. Where did you get those? Or this one. Rhett's working late again. Come over at 8. Very professional indeed. You went through my phone? I went through your cloud backup. Amazing how technology works these days. Every message, every photo, every lie carefully preserved in digital amber. She stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. You had no right. I had every right. I'm your husband. Or did you forget that while you were planning your new life with Dean? It's not what you think, isn't it? Then explain this photo. I showed her the screen, a picture she'd sent to Dean of herself in our bedroom, wearing lingerie I'd bought her for our anniversary. Was this part of your professional relationship too? Lara's composure finally cracked. The careful mask slipped away, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. You don't understand. You don't know what it's like. What's like? Being married to someone who's given up on everything. Someone who doesn't believe in miracles or hope or the possibility that God might have something better planned. So you decided to create your own miracle? Dean understands me. He sees who I really am, not just who you want me to be. And who you really are is someone who lies to her husband, commits adultery, and tries to pass off another man's child as a divine gift? There was no child. The pregnancy was a mistake, a misunderstanding. Was it? Because Dr. Hollis thinks you deliberately faked the symptoms using hormone supplements. The last of Lara's defenses crumbled. She sank into her chair, her face in her hands. How long have you known? She whispered. Long enough. The question is, what happens now? She looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. What do you want? I want the truth. All of it. How long has this been going on? What were you planning? Were you going to leave with him? For a moment, I thought she might continue lying. Then something shifted in her expression. Resignation, maybe, or relief at finally being caught. 6 months, she said quietly. It started 6 months ago. How? He was counseling me about our fertility problems. He was kind, understanding. He listened in a way you never did. So you decided to have an affair. It wasn't supposed to happen. It just evolved. One conversation led to another, and then you were planning to run away together. She nodded miserably. Dean got a job offer in Colorado, a bigger church, better salary. We thought if I was pregnant, it would give us a reason to be together, a way to start over. But you weren't actually pregnant. I thought I was. For a while I really believed it. But when the tests came back negative, I panicked. I bought hormone supplements online, thinking I could make it real somehow. Make what real? The pregnancy or the excuse to leave? Both? I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly. I sat back, processing her confession. The scope of the deception was breathtaking. Not just the affair, but the elaborate plan to use a fake pregnancy as justification for abandoning our marriage. Does Dean know about the supplements? He suspected something was wrong when you started asking questions. We both knew it was only a matter of time before you figured it out. And what did you plan to do then? I don't know. Run, I suppose. Disappear before you could stop us. With what money? Dean's broke and I control our accounts. Her face flushed. I've been saving. Small amounts over the past few months. Cash from the household budget. How much? About $3,000. I almost laughed. $3,000 to start a new life with a man who couldn't pay his own rent. The scope of their delusion was almost impressive. Where is it? Hidden in the garage, behind the paint cans. And Dean? What's his financial contribution to your grand escape plan? He was going to get an advance on his new salary. Was he? That's interesting because I did some research on Dean's background. Did you know he left his last job under suspicious circumstances? Something about missing funds from the church building campaign? Lara's face went pale. That's not true. isn't it? Did you ever actually verify his credentials, check his references, or did you just take his word for everything? He wouldn't lie to me. Wouldn't he? The man who's been helping you lie to your husband for 6 months? The man who encouraged you to fake a pregnancy to cover your affair? That man wouldn't lie to you? The silence that followed was deafening. I watched Lara's face as the implications sank in, as she realized how thoroughly she'd been manipulated. "He loves me," she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. "Does he? Or does he love the idea of a comfortable life funded by someone else's money?" "You're just trying to hurt me. I'm trying to show you reality, the same reality you've been running from for 6 months. My phone rang. Trent. "Excuse me," I said to Lara. "This is important. Rhett, we need to talk. The forensic accountant found something interesting." "What kind of something?" "Your wife's been transferring money to an account in Dean Callix's name. Small amounts, but it adds up to about $15,000 over the past 4 months. I looked at Lara, who was watching me with growing alarm. 15,000? She told me she'd only saved 3. There's more. Callix has been using that money to pay down debts and fund what looks like preparation for relocation. Apartment deposits in Colorado, moving company estimates, that sort of thing. So they were definitely planning to run. Oh, it gets better. The Colorado job? It doesn't exist. The church he claimed offered him a position has never heard of him. I felt a cold smile spread across my face. So he was planning to take her money and disappear. Looks that way. Classic con man operation. Romance the mark, get access to their finances, then vanish when the heat gets too intense. Thanks, Trent. This is very helpful. I hung up and turned back to Lara, who looked like she was about to be sick. That was my attorney. He's been investigating your boyfriend's finances. What did he find? $15,000, Lara. $15,000 transferred from our joint savings account to Dean's personal account over the past 4 months. That's impossible. I only gave him $3,000. Did you? Or did you give him access to our online banking information? Her face went white as the implications hit her. He wouldn't what? Steal from you? Lie to you? Use you for financial gain? I leaned forward. Lara, the Colorado job doesn't exist. There is no church position. Dean was planning to take your money and disappear. You're lying. Am I? Call the church in Colorado. Ask them about their offer to Dean Callix. She fumbled for her phone with shaking hands, then stopped. You don't want to call, do you? Because you're starting to realize that everything he told you was a lie. The fight went out of her then. She slumped in her chair, staring at her hands. What happens now? She whispered. Now you're going to call Dean. You're going to arrange to meet him somewhere public, and you're going to give him a choice. What choice? He can return the money he stole and disappear quietly, or he can deal with criminal charges for theft and fraud. And what about us? I looked at my wife, this woman I'd loved for 15 years, who'd thrown away our marriage for a con man's empty promises, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. There is no us, Lara. There hasn't been for 6 months. Now there's just the paperwork. She began crying then, deep, wrenching sobs that might have moved me once upon a time. But that was before I'd learned what she was really capable of, before I'd seen the depths of her deception and selfishness. Make the call, I said. It's time to end this charade. As she dialed Dean's number with trembling fingers, I allowed myself a moment of grim satisfaction. The game was almost over, and I'd won more completely than I'd ever imagined possible. But the best part was still to come. Because Dean Callix was about to learn what happened when you tried to con the wrong man's wife. And that lesson was going to be very public indeed. The parking garage behind the downtown shopping center was Dean's choice for our confrontation. 3 levels of concrete and shadows, with enough privacy for a conversation, but enough foot traffic to prevent anything too dramatic. Smart thinking for a man who was about to be cornered. I arrived 15 minutes early, positioning myself where I could watch the entrance. Lara sat in her car on the first level, her face pale and drawn. She'd made the call, delivered my ultimatum, and now we were waiting to see how Dean would respond to having his world collapse around him. At exactly 2 o'clock, Dean's battered Honda pulled into the garage. He drove slowly, cautiously, like a man expecting an ambush. When he spotted Lara's car, he parked nearby and sat for several minutes, scanning the area for threats. I waited until he got out of his car before making my move. "Hello, Dean?" He spun around, his face cycling through surprise, fear, and desperate calculation. "Rhett, I wasn't expecting you." "I'm sure you weren't. Though given the circumstances, you should have been. Look, I know how this must appear, but..." "How this appears? Dean, I know exactly how this is. I know about the affair, the stolen money, the fake pregnancy scheme, and the non-existent job in Colorado." His face went white. "I don't know what Lara told you, but Lara told me everything. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "I don't understand." "Sure you do. You're a smart man, Dean. Smart enough to run a con for 6 months, smart enough to steal $15,000 from my accounts, smart enough to convince my wife that you loved her while you were really just setting her up for the fall." Dean glanced toward Lara's car, then back at me. "It wasn't like that." "Wasn't it? Then explain the Colorado job that doesn't exist. Explain the church position you were offered by people who've never heard of you." "I can explain that." "Can you? Because I'm very interested in hearing your explanation. I'm sure the police will be too." "The police?" "Theft, Dean, fraud, identity theft, wire fraud. That's federal territory when you start transferring money across state lines." Dean's composure finally cracked. "Look, I can pay the money back. It was just a loan, a temporary thing." "A loan? Is that what you told yourself when you were transferring money from my accounts? When you were planning to disappear with my wife's savings?" "I never meant for it to go this far." "No? Then what did you mean? What was the end game here?" Dean looked around desperately, like he was hoping for divine intervention. When none came, he slumped against his car. "I was desperate, okay? The church doesn't pay enough to cover my debts, and I thought if I could just get enough money together, I could start over somewhere new. And Lara was your ticket to that new start. It wasn't supposed to be about money. At first, I really cared about her." "At first?" "She was lonely, neglected. She needed someone who understood her spiritual needs. So you decided to meet those needs personally. It just happened. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, we were involved." "And when did you decide to start stealing from her?" Dean's face flushed. "She offered to help with my financial situation. She understood that I was struggling. She offered, or you manipulated her into offering?" "I never manipulated anyone." "No? Then explain the pregnancy scheme. Whose idea was that?" "She came to me, convinced she was pregnant. I didn't know she was faking it until later. But when you found out, you decided to use it anyway. Turn her delusion into your escape plan." "I was trying to protect her. If she really believed she was pregnant, I thought it might be better to let her think..." "You thought it might be better to let her destroy her marriage based on a lie you helped maintain." Dean straightened up, some of his old confidence returning. "Her marriage was already over, Rhett. She was miserable with you. I gave her hope, purpose, a reason to believe in herself again. You gave her false hope based on lies and theft. I gave her more than you ever did." The words hung in the air between us. For a moment, I felt a flash of the old rage, the hurt and betrayal that had driven me to this point. Then it passed, replaced by cold calculation. "You're right about one thing, Dean. I never gave Lara what you gave her. I never gave her lies, theft, manipulation, and false promises. I never stole from her or convinced her to betray everything she claimed to believe in. I loved her. Did you? Because love doesn't usually involve stealing someone's money and planning to abandon them when things get complicated. I wasn't going to abandon her. No? Then explain the one-way ticket to Denver in your name only. The apartment lease application for a studio, not exactly family-sized accommodation. Dean's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. How did I find out? Because I'm not the naive husband you thought you were dealing with. I'm someone who knows how to investigate, how to follow a trail, how to document evidence. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. This is a recording of our conversation. Everything you've just admitted to is documented. The affair, the theft, the fraud, the manipulation. You can't record someone without their consent. Actually, in this state, I can. One-party consent law. Very convenient for situations like this. Dean looked around frantically, as if realizing for the first time how thoroughly trapped he was. What do you want? I want you to return every penny you stole. I want you to resign from the church. I want you to leave town and never contact my wife again. And if I don't? Then I turn this recording over to the police, along with all the financial evidence, the text messages, the photos, and everything else I've collected over the past week. You've been investigating me for a week? I've been investigating you since the moment Lara announced her miraculous pregnancy. Did you really think I wouldn't notice that my infertile wife was suddenly expecting a child? Dean's face was pale now, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air in the garage. I need time to get the money together. You have 24 hours. That's impossible. Most of it's already spent. Then you'd better figure out how to unspend it. Sell your car, liquidate your accounts, borrow from friends. I don't care how you do it, but the money will be returned by tomorrow at 5 p.m. And then? Then you disappear. Permanently. Dean looked toward Lara's car again. What about Lara? What about her? Will she be coming with me? I almost laughed. Even now, even after everything, he was still hoping to salvage something from the wreckage. Dean, Lara isn't going anywhere with you. Lara is going to be dealing with divorce proceedings, public humiliation, and the consequences of her choices. You're not part of her future anymore. But she loves me. Does she? Or did she love the fantasy you sold her? The dream of escape, the promise of a better life, the illusion that someone understood her better than her husband did? It wasn't an illusion. Wasn't it? Because from where I stand, everything about your relationship was built on lies. The job in Colorado, the financial stability you promised, even the spiritual guidance that started this whole mess. Dean slumped against his car again, the fight going out of him. I never meant for it to go this far, he repeated. Maybe not. But it did go this far, and now you have to deal with the consequences. I moved closer, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. 24 hours, Dean. The money, your resignation, and your departure from town. Don't make me come looking for you. And if I comply, you'll keep this quiet? I'll keep it as quiet as possible. But Dean, if you ever try to contact Lara again, if you ever come back to this town, if you ever run this kind of con on anyone else, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you really are. I pulled out a manila envelope and handed it to him. This is a copy of everything I have on you. Financial records, communications, background information, the works. Consider it a reminder of what's at stake. Dean took the envelope with shaking hands. How did you get all this? I told you. I'm not the man you thought you were dealing with. I'm someone who believes in thorough preparation and complete follow-through. I turned to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Dean? You might want to start thinking about what you're going to tell your next congregation about why you left your last position so suddenly. Because this kind of information has a way of following people around. As I walked back to my car, I could hear Dean opening the envelope, the rustle of papers, as he realized just how completely his life had been dissected and documented. By the time I reached my car, he was sitting on the concrete floor of the garage, staring at the evidence of his own destruction. Lara was waiting for me in her car, her face streaked with tears. "Is it over?" she asked. "It's over." "What happens now?" "Now you go home and pack your things. You can stay with your sister until the divorce is finalized." "Rhett, please, can't we try to work this out? Go to counseling, find a way to rebuild what we had?" I looked at this woman who had been my wife, who had shared my bed and my dreams and my hopes for the future, and felt nothing but cold finality. "Lara, what we had was destroyed the moment you decided to betray me. There's no rebuilding from that. There's only moving forward. I made a mistake. People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. This was 6 months of deliberate deception, theft, and betrayal. This was a calculated plan to destroy our marriage for your own selfish desires. I was lonely. So you decided to solve your loneliness by having an affair with a con man who was stealing our money. I didn't know he was stealing. Didn't you? Or did you choose not to know because it was easier than facing the truth?" She had no answer for that. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 15 years of marriage settling between us like a shroud. "I'll need a few days to find somewhere to stay," she said finally. "You have until Sunday. After that, the locks will be changed." "That's only 4 days. Then you'd better start making calls." I got out of her car and walked to my own, leaving her sitting alone in the concrete tomb of the parking garage. As I drove away, I could see her in my rearview mirror, still sitting there, still hoping for a miracle that would never come. But I was done with miracles, done with hope and faith, and the belief that people could change or that love could conquer all. I'd learned the truth about human nature, about the depths of selfishness and deception that people were capable of when they thought they could get away with it. And I'd learned that sometimes justice required a personal touch. Tomorrow, Dean would discover whether he was smart enough to cut his losses and run. And Lara would begin to understand the true cost of her choices. But tonight, for the first time in months, I was going to sleep peacefully in my own bed, secure in the knowledge that I'd outplayed them both. The game was over, and I had won. Thursday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel sharp and clear. I sat in my living room watching the clock tick toward 5 p.m., waiting to see if Dean Callix was smart enough to honor our agreement. At 4:47, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Money transferred back to your account. Resignation letter submitted. Leaving town tonight. We're done." I checked my banking app. Sure enough, $15,000 had been deposited into our joint savings account. Dean had managed to scrape together the stolen funds, probably by liquidating everything he owned and borrowing against whatever credit he had left. Smart man. He'd recognized a losing situation and cut his losses before they became catastrophic. Lara emerged from the bedroom carrying a suitcase, her face pale but composed. She'd spent the past 2 days in a kind of shocked silence, moving through the house like a ghost, packing her belongings with mechanical precision. "I'm ready to go," she said. "Your sister's expecting you?" "Yes. She said I can stay as long as I need to." "Good. The divorce papers will be served next week. Trent will handle everything." She nodded, then hesitated at the door. "Rhett, I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I am sorry. For all of it. I know you are. Do you think you might be able to forgive me?" I considered the question seriously. Forgiveness. Such a simple word for such a complex concept. "Maybe," I said finally. "But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen, or that we can go back to the way things were." "I know. I needed to know that you don't hate me." "I don't hate you, Lara. I'm disappointed in you." I'm angry about the choices you made and the way you chose to handle our problems. But I don't hate you." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for that." After she left, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in my chair, looking around the house we'd shared for 10 years. It felt different now, emptier, but also cleaner somehow, like a weight had been lifted that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. My phone rang. Trent. "I heard from Dean's former employer in Indiana. Turns out our boy has quite a history. This isn't his first time running romance scams through religious organizations." "Really?" "3 churches over the past 8 years. Same pattern every time. Target lonely women, gain their trust, extract money, disappear when things get complicated." "And he's never been prosecuted?" "Hard to prosecute when the victims are too embarrassed to press charges. Most of these women just want to forget it ever happened." "But we have him on record now." "We do. And I've taken the liberty of sharing our documentation with law enforcement in several states where he's operated. If he tries this again, they'll be ready for him." "Good." "There's something else. I did some research on the hormone supplements Lara was using. Turns out they're readily available online, marketed to women trying to conceive. But they can also create false pregnancy symptoms if used incorrectly." "So she really thought she was pregnant?" "It's possible. The supplements can cause missed periods, nausea, breast tenderness, even positive home pregnancy tests. She might have convinced herself it was real. Which makes it even more pathetic. She was so desperate to escape our marriage that she was willing to drug herself into believing a fantasy. People do desperate things when they feel trapped." After hanging up, I walked through the house, room by room, noting all the spaces that would need to be reclaimed and redefined. The guest room where Lara had hidden cash behind paint cans. The bedroom where she'd taken photos for her lover. The kitchen where she'd announced her miraculous pregnancy with such conviction. Each room told part of the story of our marriage's collapse, but they also represented opportunities for renewal. Fresh starts, new possibilities. Friday brought news that Dean had indeed left town, his apartment abandoned and his car spotted heading west on the interstate. Several church members had called asking about his sudden departure, but the official story was that he'd received an urgent family emergency requiring his immediate attention. Let them think what they wanted. The truth would come out eventually. It always did in small communities. But by then Dean would be long gone, and the immediate drama would have faded. Saturday, I received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Marin Hollis stood on my doorstep, looking professional but concerned. "Mr. Vosin, I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I wanted to check on how you're handling everything." "That's very thoughtful. Please, come in." She accepted my offer of coffee and settled into the living room chair that Lara had vacated just days before. "I've been thinking about your situation," she said. "About the psychological dynamics involved and the impact this kind of betrayal can have on someone." "I'm managing." "I'm sure you are. But I wanted you to know that what you're experiencing, the anger, the need for justice, the satisfaction in exposing their deception, those are all normal responses to this kind of trauma." "Trauma?" "Discovering that your spouse has been living a double life, that they've been systematically deceiving you for months, that they've stolen from you and planned to abandon you. Yes, that's trauma. And the way you've handled it, methodically and strategically, suggests you're someone who processes trauma through action rather than emotion." I sipped my coffee, considering her words. "Is that healthy?" "It can be, as long as you don't get stuck in the anger phase, as long as you're able to move forward rather than remaining focused on revenge. I'm not interested in revenge anymore. Justice, maybe, but not revenge." "Good, because revenge has a way of consuming people. It becomes an addiction, a need to keep inflicting pain even after the original wrong has been addressed. And you think I'm at risk for that?" "I think you're someone who's very good at strategy and planning. Those are valuable skills, but they can also become tools for prolonged retaliation if you're not careful." She finished her coffee and stood to leave. I just wanted you to know that if you need someone to talk to, someone who understands the medical and psychological aspects of what you've been through, I'm available. Thank you. That's very kind. And Mr. Vossen, what you did, exposing their deception, protecting yourself financially, ensuring they face consequences for their actions, that took courage. Not everyone would have been strong enough to handle it the way you did. After she left, I thought about her words, trauma, strategy, the difference between justice and revenge. Maybe she was right about the psychological impact of discovery and betrayal. Maybe I had been processing everything through action rather than emotion. But if so, it had worked. I'd protected myself, recovered the stolen money, ended the deception, and ensured that both Lara and Dean faced appropriate consequences for their choices. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I cooked a real dinner for myself. Not the rushed meals or takeout that had become routine, but an actual home-cooked meal with fresh ingredients and careful preparation. As I ate, I realized that for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt genuinely peaceful. Not happy exactly, that would take time, but peaceful. The constant undercurrent of tension that had been my companion for months was gone, replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose. Sunday morning, I didn't go to church. Instead, I drove to the lake outside town and spent the morning walking the trails, thinking about the future, what I wanted to do with the house, with my career, with the rest of my life. For 15 years, my identity had been wrapped up in being Lara's husband, in the shared dreams and plans we'd made together. Now I had to figure out who I was as an individual, what I wanted for myself, rather than what we had wanted together. It was both terrifying and liberating. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, I thought it might be Dean, but the message was from Lara. Saw the news about Dean leaving. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but thank you for handling everything the way you did. It could have been much worse. She was right. It could have been much worse. I could have let emotion drive my decisions, could have acted impulsively, could have handled the situation in ways that would have been destructive for everyone involved. Instead, I'd been methodical, strategic, and ultimately effective. I'd protected myself while ensuring that justice was served. I deleted the message without responding. Some conversations were over, some chapters were closed, and some bridges were meant to stay burned. As I drove home from the lake, I passed the church where Lara and I had been married, where we'd sat together every Sunday for years, where we'd prayed for children and dreamed about our future together. I didn't feel sadness or nostalgia. I felt closure. The game was over. I had won. And now it was time to figure out what came next. But that was a story for another day. Today, I was content to go home to my quiet house, to my peaceful evening, to my life free from deception and betrayal. Today, that was enough.